Today, we're at a dairy farm just outside Warragul South in Victoria's Gippsland region. The scenery here is stunning, sparking a real sense of well-being and calm. Unfortunately, for dairy farmer owner Joe Meggetto, that hasn't always been the case.
Hi, Joe. Thank you very much for having us at your farm, and it's just great that you're talking about these important issues. I wonder if you could just tell me a little bit about the farm and what you've been doing here and what happens here.
Yeah, I'm a dairy farmer. I milk up to 250 cows, producing about 1.2 million litres of raw milk a year. I've been milking here for 27 years.
So can you give me a sense of what a typical day is like for you as a small business owner, as a farm owner?
Rise and shine about between 4:15 and 4:30 each morning. Get up out of bed and I head towards the milking shed, which is a few hundred metres down the road. Start milking by 5:15 in the morning and milk them for a few hours, and then during the day it's just day-to-day farm duties, feeding cows, feeding calves, maintaining your property and milking again that afternoon starting at 3 o'clock and finishing about 5:30.
So I understand that in recent times things came unstuck a little bit and you had a difficult time.
Yeah, I went through a tough time, I should say. I think it stemmed from a lot of loneliness on the farm. You know, we live close to town here and there's a lot of close neighbours, but the isolation of working by yourself all the time and managing your property, and a dairy farmer is just not a person that milks cows. He's a vet, he's a mechanic, he's all these different types of bits and pieces that make up this one big picture of a farm. So, you know, the day-to-day pressures of all those type of things that soon build up on you, and it just sort of slowly grinding away at you and comes to a head.
So, Joe, I mean, the experience of mental health issues or depression, it's very different for everyone. Everyone has their own sort of pattern, their own way it unfolds. If you're happy to, it would be, I think, really helpful for people to hear a little bit about what it was like when you're in the thick of it all.
It was very dark. You know, you have very negative thoughts in your head, which is a dangerous thing. I definitely had those negative thoughts. You always try and find a bright light at the end of the tunnel, but, you know, sometimes the bright light's never there. You know, I thought of taking my own life plenty of times. You know, sometimes I still do today. I used to head up to the other farm feeding cattle. You'd be sitting up there, you'd feed the cattle because everything relies on you. And at the end of the day, if you don't do it, if you don't feed the cattle, well, no one's going to. And those pressures just continue to build and build. Probably at the end of the day, there's probably two things that save me. And that's one of them is my kids. And the second one is the person that's going to find me doesn't deserve that.
I mean, it sounds like it was a very dark time, and we're so pleased that you went and got some help and that you're open to talk about this issue. You know, at Beyond Blue, we really do encourage people to have the conversation when they're worried about family members. It seems like there's sort of a lot of barriers to putting up your hand or going and getting a bit of help. Can you talk a little bit about what your sort of thinking was at the time and how you went along to get some help?
As a male farmer, I think it's male across the board. We're macho people. We want to keep things inside us. And that was certainly, for me, a big factor for a number of years that I didn't really want to tell anybody because you think what they're going to... You feel scared or you feel worried what they're going to say. And in the end, I was lucky enough to have a GP as my next door neighbour, which I get on really well. And I went and saw him and I've been on the mend ever since.
Still to come, find out what Joe and all business owners can do to keep their mental health in check.
So how common is mental illness in Australia?
Mental health issues are actually remarkably common. So in Australia, in any one year, about 1 million people are experiencing depression and about 2 million are experiencing anxieties. Often family members are a little bit worried to ask about suicide because they think, oh, maybe I'll put the idea in someone's mind. But we know that's not the case, and it's fine to ask someone, how are you going, how are things going? And I think how you've described that, you know, thinking about why you wouldn't take your own life was so important. And people should also be aware that there's an enormous amount of resources and help in the community now. There's, you know, the Beyond Blue 24-hour helpline, there's Lifeline, there's going to the GP, and we really encourage people, if they're having thoughts of harming themselves or taking on their own life, get help early. That's pretty serious. And you know, having people like you talk about it really sort of normalises the conversation. In Australia, we've got a wonderful health system. You can go to your GP, you can get what's called a GP mental health plan, and that entitles you to some Medicare-funded psychology appointments and get some help. For people at the more serious end, they might need medications.
So is there specific advice that small business owners can seek?
Look, I think the issue with small businesses is that they have a lot of pressures on them. They carry a lot of responsibility because it really lands on them. On the Beyond Blue website, we have a link to what's called Heads Up, and it's really focused on workplaces. There's a whole section there for small businesses. I think some of the other really interesting information on the Heads Up website is how to make a mentally healthy workplace culture in a workplace. And so this is a shared responsibility of employers and employees to look after people who are having some mental health issues, and not to forget also, when people are starting to recover, one of the best things they can do is get back to work and you know, be around colleagues and be just into the normal routine of the day. It can be really helpful as well.
So in the future, what do I need to do to keep my mental health in check?
So I think trying to create, as best you can, a boundary between work and home.
Yeah.
Easy to say, hard to do when you're the one running the business. But getting together with other small business owners, because you guys are really, and gals, are really sharing the same sort of pressures. You know, sometimes just to hear how other people are managing is really helpful. And then, of course, as we've talked, if things are getting a bit more serious, you know, things like you're not sleeping, you can't stop worrying about work, you're obsessing about it the whole time, putting up your hand and maybe having a chat to your GP. When people such as yourselves come out, that's actually worth a lot more than me as a doctor talking about it.
Yeah.
Because they relate to you.
Yeah.
And they go, wow, if he can talk about it,
Yeah.
well, maybe I should go and get some help. So,
yeah, I strongly believe that. It's just taking that first step, because at the end of the day, people want to listen, people love you, and people care about you. And you need to take that first step. Don't continue to bottle up inside like I did for a number of years. For me, it was just a weight off my shoulders.
Some really great advice there from Dr. Grant Blaschke from Beyond Blue. If you're doing it tough, there's always help out there. Don't be afraid or embarrassed to pick up the phone and chat to someone at Beyond Blue or Lifeline. It is just so important.